The Iranians keep threatening, the Houthis fire another ballistic missile, and the IDF presses ahead with full vigor to destroy Hamas in the largest ground operation so far in the Gaza Strip. Welcome to Boots on the Ground. I'm Yair Pinto, bringing you the truth about what is happening in Israel. So reports emerged from the Gaza Strip over the past 24 hours that the IDF had dropped leaflets in Khan Yunis, as well as the Shati refugee camp in western Gaza City, in the name of the Captain's Council, calling on the camp residents to join the camp of the victors, which is the IDF. From Rafah to Khan Yunis, Division 36 fighters continue destroying Hamas's capabilities, one tunnel, one bunker, and one terrorist at a time. And at the talks in Doha, Qatar, Hamas offers another false narrative, while an Israeli source made clear that Israel rejected Hamas's proposal to release 10 hostages in exchange for a 70-day ceasefire and United States guarantees to end the war. Hamas also demanded a complete IDF withdrawal from the Gaza Strip and a massive increase in the amount of humanitarian aid that they would have unfiltered access to. They also want Israel to release all the terrorists who have been arrested during this war, including those who surrendered to the IDF in the Gaza Strip. All this they demanded in exchange for 10 living Israeli hostages to be released in 2 batches. Israeli officials refused these demands, saying that no responsible government would accept such a proposal. And United States Special Envoy Steve Witkoff agreed, saying Hamas's position is disappointing and unacceptable. And meanwhile, turning point has come, as for the first time since the war began, an aid distribution center that bypasses Hamas was opened in Gaza. Anyone who understands Hamas and what really matters to it knows that this week, for the first time, we have begun to deal with the organization's main power component, the sovereignty it has over the civilian population of Gaza. This is being done in 2 ways: by distributing humanitarian aid to the population without Hamas involvement and implementing the immigration plan. The American private company GHF has been contracted to distribute the aid, and after some delays and the surprising resignation of its CEO, they announced on Monday that they have begun the operations. However, they also condemned Hamas for threatening their employees and trying to prevent civilians from reaching the distribution points. A statement from the company said that Hamas sees us as a threat and will do everything to make us fail. And meanwhile, on Israel's northern arena, Hezbollah is in panic mode after Israel's penetration of their main supply artery. IDF ground forces briefly operated in the south of the country on the outskirts of the village of Me'is el-Jaba, disrupting Hezbollah efforts to bring supplies into the area. The Hezbollah-linked newspaper El Akbar said that the Lebanese National Army is patrolling the area after the force's entry. And finally, after the usual threats by Iranian Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, United States President Donald Trump gave Iran a dramatic ultimatum and a choice about whether to seriously engage in talks over the future of their nuclear program or move on to other options. President Trump declared they received a very short deadline, while Iran's army chief thundered that we will strike the Zionists as we did before. Speaking of Iran, their proxy force in Yemen, the Houthis, are admitting to huge losses in their ongoing clash with Israel and with the United States. So guys, we have a lot to talk about today, so let's dive into the details. I'm Yair Pinto, and this is your Boots on the Ground report about what's happening in Israel on day 599 of the war against Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis in Yemen, the Shia militias in Iraq, and all the other armed groups in this region taking their orders from Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guards, which is the head of the axis of evil in the Middle East. And guys, a moment before we begin, I want to say a huge thank you to all the following and all the help that you give us in spreading the truth. If you want to support us, make sure to click that subscribe button so you never miss another episode of Boots on the Ground. So, Operation Gideon's Chariots continues at full force in the Gaza Strip as the IDF spokesperson's unit updated a short time ago that Division 36 forces have completed their mission in the Rafah area and are now continuing activity in the Khan Yunis area of the Gaza Strip. According to the IDF, over the past week, the combat team forces have been operating in the Gaza Strip with the goal of destroying terror infrastructure above and below ground in cooperation with soldiers from the Yalam Combat Engineering Unit. The division's first support and artillery elements also continue to provide close fire support for the maneuvering forces on the ground. Their efforts are already paying off, as dozens of terrorists have been eliminated and several observation posts, combat compounds, shafts, and underground routes have been found and demolished. And meanwhile, in the last 24 hours, the IDF Arabic language spokespersons reissued an evacuation warning for the Rafah and the Khan Yunis zones following rocket fire from these areas, which on the map are defined as a dangerous combat zone. In related news, after a year and 8 months of intense fighting in Gaza, the degree of structural destruction is immense. In recent days, the IDF has begun using large machines to quickly demolish the ruins of buildings throughout the Gaza Strip. The IDF says that this process is meant to prevent terrorists from using the ruins as cover or as points from which to launch attacks on maneuvering IDF forces. The army has rented a large number of these demolition machines together with their operating crews and began working in several areas in the Gaza Strip to grind down buildings that were hit and destroyed during the long fighting. The terrorists use these buildings as cover for their attacks on our forces. They often dig tunnels underneath them, allowing them to pop up, fire from cover, and disappear back into the tunnels before return fire can be directed directly at them. Therefore, the Southern Command decided to reduce these terrorist capabilities as far as possible, so in areas where the IDF operates, the demolition machines will be brought in to grind the building debris into crushed gravel. This is something that would have had to be done at some point anyway, before the process of rebuilding the Gaza Strip even begins. The IDF spokesperson confirmed the details and said that the action is being taken to protect the soldiers and prevent the terrorists from creating positions from which to attack the forces inside the ruins of the damaged buildings. So guys, here at TBN Israel, we will continue to report every action from the viewpoint of the IDF soldiers, boots on the ground style, and as always, we ask you to help us by sharing our videos on YouTube, following us on social media, and above all, clicking the subscribe button so that you stay tuned to the truth in real time. In a moment, we will move on to reports about the distribution of humanitarian aid inside the Gaza Strip, which bypasses Hamas and brings us one step closer to the end of this war. But first, I want to take a moment and talk to you about the humanitarian crisis in Israel, because no one else is talking about this. Since the October 7th attacks, over 2 million Israelis are facing food shortages. Families have been torn from their homes. Holocaust survivors and elderly and children are living in fear and uncertainty. The Joseph Project International is Israel's #1 importer of humanitarian aid. Since the war began, they delivered more than 1,500 truckloads of life-saving supplies, including food, clothing, diapers, hygiene kits, reaching the most vulnerable. From their warehouse near Jerusalem, they have already distributed over $26 million in critical aid just since the war began. And here's the miracle: every dollar you give provides $13 worth of help, thanks to their global network and efficient logistics. But the need is overwhelming, and it's growing by the day. They cannot do this without your help. So guys, please go to josephprojectsupport.com. That's josephprojectsupport.com. Your gift today brings hope, dignity, and real help to those suffering inside Israel. So stand with Israel now and be part of God's provision. Now, back to the news, and it's a cheerful moment for me because after I've been talking about this day in and out for almost a year and a half, Israel finally appears to be taking concrete steps to sever Hamas from its control over the civilian population inside Gaza. Instead of relying exclusively on an amazingly effective military effort, which smashed Hamas but did not take away its influence over the civilian population, which is the source of its power, Israel now is moving to sever those links between the Palestinian people and Hamas in the Gaza Strip. Here's how it's being done: by distributing humanitarian aid and implementing the voluntary immigration plan. According to the new plan, humanitarian aid will be distributed to the population through a private American company, bypassing Hamas and denying them both a critical element of their control over the population as well as a source of income. As I've reported before on this channel, TBN Israel, Hamas takes the humanitarian aid that gets into the Gaza Strip by the United Nations and NGOs and gives it the best of it to their own fighters. Then they sell the rest to the population at massively inflated prices so they can use the money to buy more weapons, pay salaries to their fighters, terrorists, and so on. This new process will deny them the ability to do that, and as I reported yesterday, they're already facing a critical shortage of funds, so this will add another problem to them, and the more problems that they have, the better it is for Israel and also for the civilian Palestinian population inside the Gaza Strip. The second pillar of this new plan is the voluntary immigration plan that is now taking shape. Whether or not it can be scaled up to large numbers of Palestinians, it will be very effective in harming Hamas. Even if it only allows small numbers of Palestinians to leave the Gaza Strip, it will badly undercut the narrative that Hamas tries to peddle over the years that it is the defender and the promoter of Palestine. Instead, it becomes obvious for all to see that they're the biggest problem that ordinary Palestinian civilians have inside Gaza and in general. This is expected to be several times more effective than military pressure alone has been, although that pressure is still of critical importance and must not be relinquished. Rather, it must remain as the backbone of these other two pillars. In my view, this will render the perceptual and economic pressure on Hamas unbearable. Unlike the military pressure, which has proven survivable for Hamas, this will push the organization in an effort to halt the dangerous trend to agree to release hostages and perhaps even to unprecedented concessions. Now, let me tell you some more details about this plan. Its core aim is to increase an independent aid distribution mechanism that severs Hamas from control over the civilian population and commerce inside the Gaza Strip. For the first time, an American company will be responsible for receiving supplies at the Kerem Shalom crossing and transporting them into the Gaza Strip, while the actual distribution will be carried out by international organizations under full IDF security. In the first stage, 4 distribution centers will be set up, 3 in the south of the Gaza Strip and 1 near the Netzarim corridor. Each center is expected to supply food to about 300,000 residents. If the model proves itself, the number of centers will be doubled to 8. Food will be distributed in 70-kilogram boxes intended for a family of 5 and lasting for 10 days. Distribution will take place only after registration and security screening. A security source said this is a new mechanism meant to disconnect Hamas from control of the citizens and traders inside the Gaza Strip. The only way that aid will reach Hamas is if it robs the private families. However, that will trigger an internal uprising against Hamas. As of this morning, the American distribution personnel and the GHF security company staff are on ground and slated to begin operating in the coming days. Financing will come from a dedicated donation fund already established, which will need to be bolstered to sustain the activity for a long period of time. Ideally, hundreds of thousands of Gazans will flock to these zones to be near the food distribution points and to escape the fighting between the IDF and Hamas, as well as the tyranny of Hamas itself. So for the first time in this war, Hamas's main lever over the population in Gaza will be taken away. And for the first time in Gaza, the public will no longer be subject to Hamas's authority, nor dependent on it for food and to just survive. Of course, this strategy is not without risks. Hamas is unlikely to attack the American private security personnel in the Gaza Strip, and will be very hesitant to seize supervised food directly from the families' mouths, an act that would stir unrest against it inside Gaza. However, if the strategy appears to be working, they might get desperate enough to try something like this. Vigilance is needed, and also prayer. So guys, I invite you to join us in praying for the success of this operation, because it offers the best chance for a successful end to this war and the suffering of both the Palestinians and the Israelis. Now, the second part of the plan will involve implementing the voluntary immigration plan as a basis for rehabilitating the Gaza Strip. It includes the opening of crossings for residents who choose to leave Gaza for new lives in other countries in exchange for economic and other benefits. In order to implement this plan, Israel has established a dedicated immigration administration, and talks are underway with several African states to reach agreements on absorbing migrants from Gaza. Some states have already expressed readiness to accept them, and now negotiations revolve around funding and the returns that each state will receive. This includes direct cash payments and investment, American political support on various issues, and some things that Israel simply can't agree to. But negotiations continue, and there's reason to be optimistic. But agreement to absorb migrants is only one part of the plan. The second and critical part is a detailed, ordinary absorption program, building and developing dedicated communities, creating housing conditions, educational frameworks for children, and jobs for adults. However, it is important to understand, whether fully successful or not, voluntary immigration plan will materially affect Hamas as soon as its implementation begins. It threatens the organization conceptual and utterly contradicts its declared reason for existing. It changes the narrative from Hamas as Palestine's defender to being the party responsible for harming the Palestinians the most. Because of this, Hamas will likely try to stop it, as with the food distribution plan, less by force of arms in its current state, and more perhaps by agreeing to release hostages in return for halting implementation or even reaching far-reaching concessions that it has lost its main power components. It might even agree to disarm and have its operatives from the Gaza Strip go into exile, similar to what happened with the Palestinian Liberation Organization in Beirut following the First Lebanon War in 1985. In my assessment, if well executed, these two pillars are the campaign's turning point towards an irreversible achievement that will bring both the release of hostages and Hamas's dismantlement once its chief power component is removed. Like I said before, this is the best chance that we've seen so far to a successful conclusion of this war and an end to the suffering of both Palestinians and Israelis. So guys, please join me in praying for this plan's success. In any case, here at TBN Israel, we will keep spreading the truth, and before we move on to the latest details about negotiations with Hamas for the release of the hostages, I want to invite you to continue helping us spread the truth by sharing and following us on social media platforms, but make sure you only follow official accounts of Yair Pinto and Mati Shoshani, because there are many fake accounts out there. Okay? And the best thing that you can do is hit the subscribe button on YouTube. So the Reuters news agency reported on Monday that the Hamas terrorist organization agreed to release 10 hostages in 2 phases in exchange for a 70-day ceasefire and negotiations to end the war. Reuters reported that the negotiations would continue during the ceasefire towards a permanent ceasefire under American guarantees. Israel refused to accept the proposal, which Hamas referred to as the adoption of the Witkoff outline, and stated, "The proposal Israel received cannot be accepted by any responsible government. There is no genuine will from Hamas to move forward on a deal, and Israel remains committed to the Witkoff framework." And speaking of Witkoff, United States President Donald Trump's special envoy to the Middle East told Axios that what he has heard so far from the terrorist organization Hamas is disappointing and completely unacceptable. According to him, Israel agreed to his proposal for a hostage deal and a ceasefire that includes the release of half of the living hostages and half of the remains of hostages who have died in captivity. He further stated that such a ceasefire would lead to serious negotiations to find a path to a permanent ceasefire. He added, "I agreed to lead this negotiation. There is a deal on the table and Hamas must accept it and stop playing games." Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said on Monday evening, in his speech at the state ceremony marking 58 years since the liberation of Jerusalem, that we will defeat those who seek our lives, bring back all our hostages, and ensure that Hamas is no longer a threat to Israel. The mission, including the mission of returning the hostages, occupies us night and day, including this evening. So guys, here at TBN Israel, we will continue to report the truth and every development for the sake of our precious hostages that are held in the Gaza Strip. So keep spreading the truth, support the battle for their release, and don't forget to share and follow us on TBN Israel YouTube channel. Now, let's move on to the United States negotiations with the Islamic Republic of Iran. While United States President Donald Trump issues positive statements about significant progress in the talks, Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian adopted the aggressive tone of Supreme Leader Khamenei, declaring that we can manage even without a deal with the Americans. He also declared in a speech this week that Iran is stronger than ever and we have hundreds of alternatives if sanctions are imposed on us, thanks to our brilliant scientists and businessmen. I can't even imagine who this guy thinks is going to believe that, but maybe he doesn't even care anymore. In any case, Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei also made speeches this week in which he repeated his determination that Iran will not agree to halt or freeze its nuclear enrichment capabilities, contrary to President Trump's zero nuclear plan in Iran. Another Iranian official, Army Commander Major General Saeed Abdullahian Musavi, stated during a book launch ceremony on the history of the Iranian military this week that the Zionist regime is too inferior to damage the greatness of Iran, adding that if Israel had better be careful because we are fully prepared to deliver the appropriate blow and settle our previous debts. And once again, I find myself reading the words spoken by a senior Iranian official and wondering what planet these guys live on. I know much of this rhetoric is aimed at the domestic audience, the Iranians, as they need Iran's restive and unhappy population to believe that they are strong enough to crush any opposition to the government at this moment. They saw what happened to their client, the Assad regime in Syria, and they don't want the same thing to happen to them. I say it would be the best thing for Israel, for ordinary Iranians, the entire region, and even the whole world if this evil, wicked, and ridiculous regime was overthrown by its own long-suffering people. I will support anything my own country, the country of Israel, can do to assist in moving that process forward. Moving on, but staying on the subject of Iran, A report on Monday in the Saudi news outlet Al-Hadat quoted American sources as saying that Iran has received an ultimatum from the Trump administration to make a decision regarding the continuation of nuclear talks. The fifth round of talks between the United States and Iran was held over the weekend in Rome, and afterward, Oman's foreign minister Badr el-Busaidi wrote that there was some progress, though not final. In contrast, Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi said that the talks were complex, noting Oman has various ideas on how to overcome the disagreement in the nuclear talks with the United States. There is a need to continue. There is potential for progress with the proposals that Oman presented. In contrast, Iran's Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei cast doubt on the success of the negotiations last week, declaring that Washington's demands that Tehran not enrich uranium is outrageous, and declaring that "I don't believe the nuclear talks with the United States will yield results." Khamenei, the Supreme Leader of Iran, also called on the United States to avoid presenting outrageous demands and said no one in Iran is waiting for American approval regarding uranium enrichment. We will not accept the United States and Europe's demand to stop enrichment. So guys, here at TBN Israel, we will continue to update you on every development regarding the head of the axis of evil in the Middle East, the Iranian Revolutionary Guards. And we ask you to unite in prayer with us for the Iranian people that are suffering the most because of this evil regime. But it's not only the people of Iran who are suffering because of this insane regime and its delusions. The support they send to the Houthis in Yemen is directly affecting us here in Israel. Another ballistic missile was fired at Israel on Monday, sending millions of people running to bomb shelters. This missile, like so many others before it, was intercepted in the air by the IDF, but the Houthis continue firing. This week, the leader of the Houthis made an unusual statement in which he admitted to the enormous losses his organization has sustained at the hands of the recent United States and Israeli air campaign. In a statement on Monday by the Houthi-controlled Red Sea Ports Corporation, it was reported that direct and indirect losses amounted to $1.387 billion at the ports of Hodeidah, Salif, and Ras Isa due to a series of aggressive Israeli and American raids that were carried out from July 2024 to May 2025. The Houthis added that direct damages amounted to more than $531 million, while indirect losses totaled around $856 million due to halted services and disrupted supply flows. The statement also said that the attacks targeted the infrastructure and the operational facilities of civilian ports, destroying docks, two main cranes, power stations, generators, and service and logistical facilities. Tugboats and warehouses used to unfold food, aid, and medicine were also damaged in all the three ports. Israel's most recent strike in Yemen was about a week and a half ago, on May 16, when 15 F-15s and F-35 aircrafts launched 35 munitions at the Hodeidah and the As Salif ports. And despite all of this, since the beginning of May, 13 ground-to-ground missiles and 4 UAVs have been launched at Israel from Yemen. All launches were intercepted except for the missile that fell near the Ben Gurion International Airport, causing minimal damage. And meanwhile, United States Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem revealed new details about her meeting with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu concerning the negotiations with Iran. An official statement from the Prime Minister's office said that the Homeland Security Secretary expressed unequivocal support for the Prime Minister and for the State of Israel. She expressed great appreciation for the Prime Minister's policies on building the fence on the Egyptian border and managing the war. So guys, here at TBN Israel, we will keep bringing you regular reports on all these developments going forward. So keep praying for Israel as it fights against all this evil that are threatening to take over the whole world, but starting with Israel. Pray for the hostages to get released from the Gaza Strip. Pray for the IDF soldiers that are defending us. And most importantly, I would say pray for their families, for the wives that are at home, all the husbands that are at home with the kids, all alone. It's very, very hard on the family unit, and that's what the enemy is trying to attack. So let's pray for love in the family unit of the IDF soldier. Let's pray for all the innocent lives in the Gaza Strip to have God's love in their heart. And let's unite in prayer for the peace of Jerusalem.
Hello, this is Mati here in Jerusalem with TBN Israel.
This is Yair Pinto from TBN Israel here in Jerusalem. TBN Israel is keeping viewers informed with Israel-focused news, culture, and what God is doing in this land.
Support TBN Israel today online at tbn.org/Israel. Thank you.